don't want to be like this anymore." That's what he said. Not shouted, whispered. His hands were shaking as he sat across from me in that dim corner booth, the kind of place where conversations go to die or begin. He'd spent 15 years building a reputation. The guy everyone was afraid to cross. The one who never backed down. The man who met every slight with immediate, violent escalation. And now he was broken. Not because someone had finally beaten him, but because he'd beaten everyone and had nothing left but the wreckage of relationships, opportunities, and respect he'd destroyed with his own hands. He thought strength meant never letting anything slide. He thought power was in the reaction, the explosion, the dominance display. He was wrong. And by the time he understood, he'd already lost everything that mattered. This is the trap, the one almost everyone falls into. The belief that responding to provocation with force, with anger, with immediate retaliation is what separates the weak from the strong. It doesn't. It separates the controlled from the enslaved. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. The man who must constantly prove he's dangerous is the man who knows, deep in his bones, that he isn't. The performance of strength is always a confession of weakness. Watch a truly powerful person and you'll notice something unsettling. They move differently. They speak differently. When insulted, they don't flinch. When threatened, they don't rush to respond. They observe. They calculate. They wait. And when they do act, it's surgical, precise, devastating, but never emotional. Emotion is the leash by which weak men control strong ones. If someone can make you angry, they own you. If they can make you afraid, they direct you. If they can make you desperate to prove yourself, they've already won. You're no longer acting from your own will. You're dancing to their rhythm, and they're laughing while you do it. Most people never learn this. They go through life reacting, defending, proving, performing. They think they're strong because they never let anything go. They don't realize they're slaves. Slaves to their pride. Slaves to their insecurity. Slaves to the opinion of people who don't matter and never will. The world is full of provocateurs, people who poke and prod and push, searching for your breaking point. They're not strong, they're hunters looking for weakness. And your reaction is the blood in the water that tells them they've found it. When you respond emotionally, you tell them everything. You tell them what you fear, what you value, where you're vulnerable. You hand them the map to your destruction and beg them not to use it. They will. They always do. But there's another way. A path that requires more discipline than most possess. More patience than the age rewards. More intelligence than brute force could ever substitute for. It's the path of the strategist. The one who sees 10 moves ahead while his opponent is still savouring the taste of his opening insult. This path begins with understanding a fundamental truth about human nature. People who attack are performing. They're not secure in their position, or they wouldn't need to attack. They're testing, probing, trying to establish dominance because they don't have it. A king doesn't challenge peasants. He doesn't need to. Only the pretender to the throne must constantly prove his claim. When someone provokes you, they're revealing their weakness, not yours. They need your reaction. They need you to engage, to validate their importance by treating them as a threat. Silence denies them this. It's not passive. It's active refusal to play a game you didn't agree to, on terms you didn't set, for stakes that don't matter. Silence is the ultimate shield, not the silence of cowardice, but the silence of complete self-possession. When you say nothing, you give nothing. No information, no leverage, no satisfaction. The provocateur throws his best punch and it lands in empty air. He stumbles forward, off balance, exposed. And you haven't moved. This requires you to kill a part of yourself, the part that needs to be seen as strong, the part that can't tolerate disrespect, the part that believes your worth is determined by how others treat you. That part must die, because as long as it lives, you can be controlled. The second principle is patience. The trap of the reactive mind is that it operates on the provocateur's timeline. He chooses the moment, he sets the terms, he decides when the game begins. You rush to respond because you think speed demonstrates strength. It demonstrates the opposite. It demonstrates that he controls your tempo. Patience is not waiting for the right moment to strike back with the same emotional violence. That's just delayed reaction. Patience is the willingness to let the moment pass entirely if it serves you better. To absorb the insult, the threat, the challenge, and simply continue with your larger purpose uninterrupted. This is what separates the tactician from the brawler. The brawler sees every provocation as a test he must pass immediately. The tactician sees a landscape of options. He can respond now, later, never, indirectly, through others, through circumstances. He has time because he's not enslaved to his emotions. Time is a weapon, and he knows how to use it. Most provocations resolve themselves if left alone. The loud, aggressive person who makes a scene today is forgotten tomorrow. His energy burns out. His audience loses interest. His target, if he refuses to engage, emerges untouched, while the provocateur is exhausted and exposed. This is the power of patience. You let them destroy themselves while you do nothing. But there are moments when action is required, when silence or patience would be interpreted as weakness by audiences that matter, or when the provocation threatens something you cannot afford to lose. This is where timing becomes critical. Timing is not about speed, it's about advantage. The emotional reactor strikes when he's angry. The strategist strikes when victory is certain. He waits for the moment when his opponent is exposed, overextended, distracted. He waits for the context that will make his response devastating and his opponent's position untenable. This requires observing without reacting, watching your opponent's patterns, noting who he's aligned with, what he values, where his support comes from, what his weaknesses are, information that the emotional reactor never gathers because he's too busy being angry. When the strategist does act, it doesn't look like a reaction, it looks like an independent move, calculated and cold. The connection to the original provocation is invisible to most observers. This protects him. He hasn't lost his temper. He hasn't revealed his hand. He's simply executed a plan that happened to destroy someone who made the mistake of making him an enemy. The fourth principle is non-reaction at the emotional level. This is different from silence. You can remain silent and still be boiling internally, still replaying the insult, still imagining scenarios of revenge. This internal reaction is just as destructive as an external one. It consumes your energy, distorts your judgment, keeps you trapped in someone else's frame, Non-reaction means genuinely not caring, not pretending not to care while secretly seething, actually releasing the emotional charge. This is the hardest principle because it requires you to confront why you care in the first place. Why does this person's opinion matter? Why does this insult land? What part of you believes it might be true? If you're secure in who you are, insults have nowhere to land. They're just sounds. Words from someone whose judgment you don't respect, whose opinion you don't value, whose existence barely registers. The only reason an insult wounds is because some part of you agrees with it. That part must be examined and either integrated or destroyed. This is psychological warfare turned inward. You're not fighting your opponent, you're fighting your own weakness. The part that needs validation, the part that fears humiliation, the part that can be manipulated through pride or shame. When that part dies, you become untouchable. Not because you're defended, but because there's nothing left to attack. Detachment is the fifth principle. This is the ability to step outside the situation entirely and view it as if you were watching strangers interact. Remove your ego from the equation. Remove your emotional investment. Look at the dynamics objectively. What is actually happening here? What does this person want? What do they gain if I react? What do I gain if I don't? This perspective shift is clarifying. Most conflicts that feel enormous in the moment are trivial when viewed from distance. Someone said something rude at a party. Someone cut you off in traffic. Someone questioned your competence in a meeting. In 10 years, will this matter? In 10 months? In 10 days? Usually the answer is no. And if it doesn't matter, why are you giving it your energy? Detachment allows you to choose your battles with precision. Not every provocation deserves a response. Not every insult requires defense. Not every challenge must be met. The person who fights every battle is exhausted, scattered, ineffective. The person who fights only the battles that matter is formidable. Strategic withdrawal is the sixth principle, and perhaps the most misunderstood. Withdrawal is not retreat. Retreat is panicked flight from a superior force. Withdrawal is calculated repositioning to a stronger position. Sometimes the most intelligent response to provocation is to remove yourself from the situation entirely. This requires humility, the ability to say, this environment, this person, this interaction is not worth my time or energy. Not because you're afraid, but because you value your resources too highly to waste them on someone beneath your notice. You'll find that if you subscribe now, you're acknowledging something most people refuse to see. That the truth about power makes you uncomfortable. That you'd rather face it than hide from it. Most will close this and return to their comfortable illusions. You're still here. That means something. The cost of emotional reaction is not just the immediate loss of composure, it's the pattern it creates. Every time you react emotionally to provocation, you train the people around you. You teach them exactly how to control you. Push this button, get this response. It's Pavlovian. And once they know your buttons, you're no longer a person to them. You're a machine they can operate. Worse, you train yourself. Each emotional reaction deepens the neural pathway, makes it easier to trigger next time, harder to control. You become a slave to your own conditioning, a predictable, manageable, controllable element in other people's games. This is how strong people end up as tools for weaker, smarter operators. The emotional reactor also destroys his own opportunities. Trust is built in calm. Respect is earned in restraint. The person who explodes at minor provocations is never given serious responsibility, never trusted with sensitive information, never included in high-stakes decisions, because everyone knows he can be manipulated. Everyone knows he's a liability. Your reputation is built in how you handle pressure, not how you handle ease. Anyone can be calm when things go well. The measure of a man is what he does when insulted, when threatened, when provoked. If he lashes out, he's revealed himself as weak. If he remains composed, calculates, and acts from a position of strength, he's revealed himself as dangerous. Emotional reaction also costs you information. When you're angry, you stop listening. You stop observing. You miss opportunities, miss threats, miss the larger context. The emotional reactor is blind. He sees only his wounded pride and his need to retaliate. Meanwhile, the strategist sees everything. He's calm enough to notice the real game being played beneath the surface provocation. And there's a darker cost. The cost to your soul. Each time you allow someone else to determine your emotional state, you give away a piece of your sovereignty. You become less self-directed, more reactive, more controlled by circumstance and other people's malice. Over time, this accumulates. You wake up one day and realize you're not living your life. You're responding to an endless series of provocations, real and imagined. You've become a puppet, and the strings are held by anyone clever enough to make you angry. This is the death spiral of the reactive man. He spends his energy defending his ego instead of building his empire. He burns bridges instead of building alliances. He proves he's strong in ways that demonstrate he's weak. And he dies bitter, isolated, surrounded by enemies he created, wondering why the world never recognized his greatness. The world recognized it. It recognized it as nothing. The path forward requires brutality toward yourself. You must become aware of your triggers, the words, situations, and people that bypass your reason and activate your emotion. These are your weaknesses, and they must be catalogued, understood, and systematically desensitized. This is not comfortable work. It requires you to sit with the discomfort of being provoked and not reacting. To feel the anger rise and watch it instead of obeying it. To experience the urge to defend yourself and let it pass. Each time you do this, you weaken the trigger. Each time you fail, you strengthen it. You're training your nervous system to treat provocation as information rather than threat. To respond to insults the way you'd respond to someone telling you the weather. Just data. No emotional charge. This takes time. It takes repetition. It takes the willingness to fail repeatedly and continue. At 12 minutes in, if you're still watching, you understand this isn't entertainment. This is instruction. And instructions only matter if you're willing to follow them. Most people consume content like junk food. They want the feeling of learning without the pain of change. Subscribing right now is your small acknowledgement that you're not most people, that you're willing to do what this requires. Don't lie to yourself about who you are. The strategist builds a reputation over years through consistent, controlled responses. He's known as the man who doesn't react, who doesn't engage in petty conflicts, who operates on a different level. This reputation becomes a shield. People stop provoking him because they know it won't work. They stop testing him because they've learned he can't be manipulated. This is real power, not the power to hurt people who disrespect you, the power to make respect irrelevant. To operate so far above the game of insults and provocations that participating would be beneath you. The king doesn't respond to the peasant's insult, not because he's afraid, but because acknowledging it would elevate the peasant to the king's level, and that's a gift the peasant hasn't earned. When you reach this state, you notice something profound. The provocations stop. Not because people respect you more, though they do, but because you've removed the reward. Provocation only works if it gets a reaction. If it doesn't, it's just wasted energy. The provocateur moves on to easier targets. Targets who still react. Targets who can still be controlled. You become a black hole of provocation. Insults, threats, challenges, they all go in and nothing comes out. This is unnerving to people. They don't understand it. They interpret it as strength they cannot match, which is correct, or as indifference they cannot penetrate, which is also correct. Either way, you've won without fighting. The final realization is that you were never fighting them. You were always fighting yourself, your pride, your insecurity, your need for validation. The external provocateur was just a mirror showing you where you were still weak. When you eliminate those weaknesses, the mirror shows nothing. The provocateur is irrelevant. This is the loneliest victory, because you can't share it. The people around you, most of them are still slaves to their reactions. They'll see your restraint as weakness, your patience as cowardice, your strategic silence as inability to defend yourself. Let them. Their misunderstanding is your camouflage. The sheep don't need to recognize the wolf. They just need to be avoided or used. You'll find over time that your circle shrinks. People who operate on emotion can't tolerate people who don't. Your calm disturbs them. Your control makes them feel out of control. They'll drift away or attack, trying to drag you back down to their level. Let them go. The price of sovereignty is solitude, but it's a price worth paying. What you gain is freedom, not freedom from consequences. Actions still have consequences, but freedom from being controlled by others through your emotions. Freedom from being predictable, freedom from being trapped in reactions you didn't choose. You become the author of your responses instead of the victim of your triggers. And in that freedom, you find power, the power to choose your battles. The power to act from strategy instead of emotion. The power to destroy your enemies not in rage, but in cold calculation. When the moment is perfect and the cost to you is zero. This is the power that actually matters. This is the power that builds empires while emotional reactors build nothing but graveyards of burned relationships and squandered opportunities. The man in that booth, the one who whispered he didn't want to be like this anymore, he understood too late. 15 years of immediate reactions, of proving his toughness, of never backing down. And what did it earn him? Fear without respect, isolation without peace, a reputation that closed more doors than it opened. He'd won every confrontation and lost everything that mattered. You don't have to make his mistake, but you will unless you decide right now that your ego is not your master, that your pride is not your guide, that your emotional reactions are not your destiny. This decision must be made consciously, deliberately, and then reinforced every single day through practice. Most people never make this decision. They coast through life reacting, defending, proving, and they die without ever touching real power. They mistake the performance of strength for strength itself. They confuse volume with authority. They never learn that the truly powerful make no sound at all until the moment they strike. And by then, it's too late for their opponent to do anything but fall. If you've watched this far, you're different, or you want to be. But wanting is not enough. Subscribing is not enough. Understanding is not enough. This requires implementation. Daily practice, constant vigilance, the willingness to catch yourself in the act of reacting and stop. To feel the emotional surge and refuse to obey it. To train yourself through repetition to become someone who cannot be controlled. The world is full of people trying to control you. Through anger, through guilt, through fear, through manipulation of your pride and insecurity. Every one of them is your enemy. Not because they wish you harm, though some do, but because they wish to use you for their purposes instead of letting you pursue yours. Your emotional reactions are the handles by which they pick you up and point you in whatever direction serves them. Remove the handles. Become smooth, featureless, impossible to grip. Let provocations slide off you like water off stone. Watch the people around you exhaust themselves trying to get a reaction while you remain unmoved, observing, calculating. Waiting for the moment when action serves you rather than them. This is not easy. If it were easy, everyone would do it. Most people will tell you it's impossible. They'll say you're repressing your emotions, that it's unhealthy, that you need to express yourself. They're wrong, or more accurately, they're telling you what they need to believe to justify their own weakness. Don't let their limitations become yours. The path of emotional control is the path of power. Not the theatrical power of the loud, aggressive fool who must constantly prove himself, but the silent power of the man who has nothing to prove because he knows what he is, who moves through the world untouchable, unmoved, executing his will without interference from others or from his own undisciplined reactions. When you finally achieve this, you'll understand why so few attempt it. The price is your comfortable identity. The person you thought you were, reactive, emotional, proving yourself at every turn, that person must die. What remains is colder, harder, more alone, but infinitely more powerful. And in a world that runs on control and manipulation, power is the only currency that matters. You can return to your comfortable slavery, most do. Or you can do the work, subscribe if you're serious, but more importantly, start today, right now. The next time someone tries to provoke you, tries to make you angry, tries to control you through your emotions, remember this moment. Remember what you learned, and choose not to react. That choice, repeated 10,000 times, is what separates the sovereign from the slave.